Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Undergraduate, a percussion-based podcast. From repertoire to everyday life lessons, we are seeking to share our experiences as current students. And today, the usual co-hosts with me, David and Michael. Hope is unfortunately not here due to some health issues, but nothing serious. She'll be back with us soon. As you can see, we have a new guest. Our guest today is currently pursuing a Master's of Music in Percussion at the Juilliard School, where he studies with Daniel Druckman. He recently graduated with a Bachelor of Music in Percussion Performance as a Lois S. Scholar from the Eastman School of Music, where he studied with Michael Burritt. In the last 2 years, he has received the Youth Jury Prize at the TROMP International Percussion Competition and was selected as one of 6 semi-finalists at the 74th Geneva International Music Competition. He also earned a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science from the University of Rochester. Let's welcome Oliver Shue.
Thank you. It's great to be on the podcast.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, of course. It's great to have you. So we're just gonna kind of jump right in here.
Cool.
So that last thing I just read, Bachelor's of Science in Computer Science from the University of Rochester. Yeah. So why did you decide to do a double major?
Good question. I got that a lot when I was doing it, and I wasn't really sure at first, but I think, after 5 years, I've kind of figured out why I did it and, whether it was a good idea or not. I would say that at first, I kind of just did it because I was able to. So, the Eastman School of Music is part of the University of Rochester. So they actually make it, they don't make it easy, but they make it easier than maybe it would normally be by, for example, allowing me to count my music theory and music history classes towards my computer science degree. So instead of having to take humanities, at the University of Rochester, that's covered by my music classes at Eastman. So, I had AP credits from high school, and, with these Eastman classes, it was going to be possible to, do it in 4 or 5 years without going absolutely crazy. So I figured that, instead of taking humanities classes at Eastman that maybe I wasn't as interested in, it would be because Eastman had this requirement where every semester you had to take at least one non-music course. I figured that it would be cool to explore this interest of mine. So, in high school, I had taken an AP computer science class, and I thought it was really cool. My dad is a software engineer. So, I was kind of exposed to that world. I was always into tech, so I thought it would be cool to kind of pursue this as a major. And then as I progressed through, my 5 years of undergrad, I took 5 years to do both degrees. I started to realize that it was actually a really smart thing to do in terms of giving myself something that was completely unrelated to music, so I could, spend my time at Easton practicing and taking lessons and rehearsing, but I could also take a 10-minute bus over to the River campus and take my computer science classes or work on my homework assignment in one of their labs and do something that would get my mind off of music. And I found that would become very healthy. Over the summers, I, did these internships at technology companies. And oftentimes I would take a 10 or 12-week break from practicing marimba or snare drum. And I found that was really refreshing for me. So, there were different reasons for why I did it and, why I think it was a good idea. But that gives you an idea of what I was thinking.
Cool.
That's awesome. So have you ever have struggles between balancing the two majors, and do you have solutions for those struggles?
Yeah, for sure. It was hard. I didn't really have a model to go off of. There weren't students who were there was one other student who did a data science and trombone performance major, but I kind of had to figure it out for myself in terms of, okay, so I have a scheduling conflict. What do I do? Do I miss half of studio class at Eastman? Do I show up late to my lecture on the River campus? So those were the kind of questions that I kind of had to figure out on my own. So yeah, there were struggles. There was a lot of compromising. I think, David, you'll remember, like, there were some semesters where I actually did miss half of studio class and I had to come late or leave early, which was a shame because I missed out on some master classes from guest artists and, my peers playing. But I was lucky that my professor, Michael Burritt, was supportive of my other degree. And, I made compromises. Sometimes, I had to stay up late or spend an entire weekend working on a programming project instead of, practicing for my next lesson or an audition. So, it was all about compromising and prioritizing. So sometimes if I had, a piece coming up in percussion ensemble or one ensemble that required a lot of practice, or if I was getting ready for a competition, maybe I would have to, take it easy on the computer science side. So maybe not spend as much time studying for an exam as I should have. So, it was a learning experience. I think by my 4th or 5th year, I kind of got the hang of it. But I would say the first 2 years were definitely challenging and it was tough. Yeah.
Sweet. Okay. So moving to the practice side of things. Are there any particular practice habits that benefit you the most? Are there any bad ones that you catch yourself doing somewhat often?
Yeah, that's a good question. I actually was just watching this live stream Zoom session earlier this week on practicing. A bunch of people, Michael Burritt, Shiru, Jake Nisley, Michael Rose, and they were talking about practicing during the time of pandemic and otherwise. And yeah, it's an important topic. I think that my approach to practicing has stayed the same for the past few years. In high school, I was exposed to an approach of, practicing really slowly and taking a gradual approach to learning music. So never getting ahead of myself. So basically, I just start really painfully slow with a metronome always and make sure that I really know the music before I go any faster. In terms of more general strategies, I guess I try not to spend, 4 hours in a row on the same thing. Maybe I'll do an hour and a half or 2 hours on one piece and then go to something else. And try not to get burned out. It's easy if you're preparing for something intense like an audition or a competition to just, spend too much time trying to get something perfect. And I found that my personal approach is to kind of trust myself and trust my process that I've developed and know that, if I just spend time on each piece consistently, over the course of a few weeks or a month or 2 months, everything will get to where it needs to be because it's worked for me in the past. So that's, kind of my general approach. I can go into more detail if you want me to.
If you want. Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, I guess, for me, practicing, there are different ways, different things that you're going to be practicing. Sometimes you're going to be learning, the notes for a new piece. I'm doing that right now with this concerto for this competition that I'm doing. And, the first few days are miserable because, it's really overwhelming. You're trying to learn a new notation if it's multi-percussion. And, it's just a matter of not getting frustrated, which isn't always easy to do, but not getting frustrated and kind of thinking big picture. So I always, put the metronome on at whatever tempo that the piece is, written to be performed at. And then I play like tiny chunks. So like maybe a beat, maybe 2 beats, maybe even a measure, however much I can play at tempo. I do it to make sure that whatever sticking that I'm thinking of can work. This applies for marimba or multi-percussion. I'm talking about solo rep right now. Practicing for excerpts is a little different. But when it comes to solo rep, I'll make sure that my sticking can work, my setup can work, and then, I'll slow down to the metronome will be going on at the same tempo, but I'll be in reality playing at half tempo or even a quarter tempo. if that makes sense. So if the metronome is playing quarter notes at like 140, I'll treat that as an eighth note or even a 16th note. So I can switch between playing a snippet at like real life tempo and also my practice tempo, which could be half or, a fourth, if that makes sense. So that's like, my process for learning music. And, I take it in chunks. So I'm, chugging along at a quarter tempo or half tempo, and I'll play, a phrase at a time, and eventually, start stitching phrases together and then whole sections of a piece. And, the next day I'll bump it up 2 clicks, 5 clicks, depending on where I'm at, and, repeat the process and make sure that I am really comfortable playing the notes. When it comes to when I'm closer to performance, it changes a little bit. I'm still going to be doing some slow practice, but it's going to be doing long sections, making sure that I'm comfortable, but also working on my phrasing, making sure that I'm being as expressive as I want to be, making sure that my dynamic range is as wide as I want it to be, all these musical things that maybe when I first start learning, I haven't really thought about yet. So it's a process. When you first start, I know some people like to think about phrasing as soon as they start learning, but for me, when I first start learning a piece, I'm really thinking about, my stickings, how am I going to get around the instrument, really try to think about accuracy and being perfect with notes. And then, pretty soon I'm starting to think about phrasing as I start to understand the music more. And then as I get closer to performance, it's a matter of doing lots of mock performances. So whether it's for yourself, whether you're recording yourself, or if there's a friend in the room, or nowadays over Zoom, but just giving yourself a lot of chances to perform before the actual performance. So yeah, I would say that's my practice philosophy in a nutshell.
Yeah, it's interesting because my professor, Nancy Zussman, she is the other way. Because she doesn't memorize any music, so she always just like, when you learn the music, you do all the phrasing, you think about the musical idea right from the start. And I was just like, I can't do that, because I'm with you. Like, I think it's easier when you know how to play the piece, and then you could add those musical ideas. But like for some other people, they're just so good naturally, like they treat marimba like a piano. So I don't know, it works with different people. But
yeah, I think it's definitely important to, as early as possible, you're playing music after all, you want to be thinking about your phrases and phrasing, and that affects the stickings that you choose when it comes to marimba. You want to pick stickings that make musical sense. It's not just for accuracy. But I think for me personally, a lot of the times, my goal is to have something memorized, whether it's marimba or multi-percussion. So I really need to concentrate on starting really slowly. And sometimes when you're at that slow of a tempo, it's hard to be thinking about larger musical shapes and ideas. So sometimes that comes later in the process for me.
Yeah. Well, while we're on the topic of competition, like, can you talk about like how you're planning a timeline for preparing a competition? Like, because you kind of mentioned learning the rap, and then just go on detail with like the timeline with competition.
Yeah. So in your introduction, Shane, you mentioned 2 competitions, TROMP and Geneva, that I've done in the last 2 years. And I would say that my process was fairly similar for both of those competitions. I basically started preparing as soon as I found out that I was selected. So after, my pre-screening tapes were approved for, advancing on to the first round of the competition. So that was usually in July, I think maybe June for Geneva. So that's when I really started working on the new rep for me. So for example, last year, 2019, Geneva commissioned 2 pieces for the competition. One was a marimba solo by Michael Burritt for the second round, and then the other piece was a chamber piece for kind of a drum set multi-setup with bass clarinet and electronics, and that was for the third and semi-final round. So, we got the music for those pieces probably in about July. So I rented a marimba. I was in New York City at the time. I rented a 5-octave marimba so I could just start learning that piece, because I knew that, with a new piece of music, you need to give yourself plenty of time. The competition was in November, but, if I waited until September, it would probably be too late at that point, because I knew that I had a total of 12 pieces. At that time, I had already set my program, so I knew what I was playing for, the 4 rounds of the competition. And if I waited until September, it would be too late. So I started with, the marimba solo and just learning the notes. It was a similar thing in 2018 for TROMP. I was also in New York City at the time, and I started practicing the new pieces that I needed to learn for the competition. So for TROMP, they require you to play, as David knows, a Dutch marimba solo, so a piece by a Dutch composer, and you pick from a list. So for me, that piece was Barracuda. So I started learning that in July, maybe August. And then once I got to, August, early September, I was back at school where I could, have access to all the gear I needed. So that's when I would start to add in my first round rep, like the remainder of my first round rep. So, usually this was 2 or 3 pieces. For TROMP, it was 3 pieces. Geneva, it was 2. And really try to get those performance ready. So right now I'm actually preparing for TROMP again. It happens every 2 years. This year it's online with video recordings. And so my first round was 3 pieces. For the past, maybe the first 2 weeks of September, I was just practicing those 3 pieces. 1 marimba, 1 vibes, and 1 multi-piece. And, I think last week was my goal for, being able to perform those 3 pieces at a high enough level. And then I put them away. I take a break and I move on to my semi-final round. Or in this year's case, I start learning the commissions. So there's a concerto for the final round. There's a solo for the semi-final round. I start working on that, and I don't really touch the first round stuff, because I know that when I come back to those pieces at the end of October, a week or 2 before the competition, I'm still gonna know how they go, But at that point, they'll be fresh. I won't be burned out, If I practice those pieces for 3 or 4 months, by the time it gets to the competition, I'm gonna be sick of them. I'm not gonna want to play them, and you're not gonna get the same level of excitement or just pure expressivity out of playing those pieces. So so for me, it's just a matter of pacing. I think probably in a week or 2 I'll start. So right now I'm doing my semifinals stuff. I'll probably add in my final round solo, when we get to October, and then at the end of October I'll just be doing run-throughs of everything. I was lucky at Eastman during my undergrad to, have a really supportive CDO. My friends like David would always listen to me play, 20 minutes, 30 minutes of music at a time. And that was really helpful. I think it's similar to taking an orchestral audition. I don't think people usually try to play every single thing every day, right? You gotta have some sort of schedule where you work on your weak spots earlier, or maybe the first round stuff earlier, and then your final round stuff, especially when you're younger. So when I did TROMP 2 years ago, I was still an undergrad, and I think I wasn't really confident. I don't think anyone should be when they're that young, of your chances of making it to the final round of a competition. You go there to learn, to have a great experience, but I don't think anyone is going to be like, you're 18 and you're like, I'm going to win this competition, right? So for me, I always prioritize the first and the second round. But, things change as you get older. Maybe you start thinking about the final round earlier. But yeah, that's my process in general. Sorry, I might be talking too much.
No, that's great.
You're good.
I think now it's David. You have a question about?
Yeah, David.
Oh boy, do I have a question. So So Oliver, when we were at school together, every single time I would, either go to 415 or I'd walk into your practice room, it always, felt like you were super comfortable with what you were doing. Like it always looked like, at least to me, that you were in full control. But I was always curious because when preparing for TROMP, for example, did you ever encounter a moment where you're like, oh crap, I really don't want to practice. I really don't want to do this commissioned piece right now. And if there really ever was a time that something like that happened, how did you find the motivation to kind of help mend that that process?
Yeah, that's a good question. Tough question too. Yeah, it definitely happens, and I'm lucky that I guess maybe you didn't walk in when I was super frustrated. I would say usually those moments happen earlier in the process for me. So when I first start learning a piece, maybe it just seems impossible to me to play it at tempo. I don't know if my stickings will work. Sometimes I don't like the uncertainty associated with learning a piece. I don't like not knowing whether or not my stickings are going to work at tempo. So, I can get frustrated with that. Sometimes if I know that I want to memorize a piece and it doesn't seem like it's going to be possible to memorize it in time, that can get frustrating too. But I can say as an example, I was super frustrated. If we were having this discussion a week and a half ago, I would be ranting about this concerto, right? There was not a setup provided, which is reasonable, I guess. Maybe the composer didn't have these instruments, or just wanted the participants to figure it out for their own, because everyone might have a different setup. But I had all these instruments and this giant score, and just really quickly, this piece is written for vibraphone, glockenspiel, 6 wood slacks, 5 mixing bowls, 5 triangles, 2 metal pipes, 4 cymbals, 5 drums. Okay, so you have all this stuff and you're playing all of them at the same time, literally. How do you approach that? So, the first 2 days, all right, let's get the vibraphone, the glockenspiel, and the drums in one place and see if I can kind of play them. Doesn't work. Okay, I can't use tom-toms, they're too big. I need to use bongos. So then, put the tom-toms away that you spent 2 hours setting up and grab some bongos. So it's really frustrating when you're learning a new setup piece for the first time. And I don't know, David, if you remember, but a few years ago, I was learning Rogashanti at Eastman, piece by James Wood for setup. And I think the first few weeks, I would break a mallet every day, and I would text you guys to complain. What I didn't realize is you can't use birch mallets for a piece like Rogashanti. You need to use rattan. Once I realized that, I stopped breaking mallets. My point is, I think early on there are things that I can get frustrated with whether it's uncertainty or just roadblocks, with the process of learning a new piece. As I get closer to performances, it can also get tough. It can, if my lessons, or if I don't play the way I want to in a lesson or a run through, that can be frustrating and sometimes scary. I remember some run throughs, maybe 2 weeks before the competition, it would go really poorly because, I distinctly remember last year, I had a studio class performance where I had to set up maybe half an hour before the performance, and there was so much gear, and I barely finished setting up, and I was all sweaty, and I just had a bunch of memory slips, and that's kind of demoralizing when you play for your peers and it just doesn't go the way you want it to. So yeah, I would say there are lots of moments where I get frustrated. I don't know if I answered your question about how I deal with it though. I think it's just a matter of kind of thinking out about the larger picture. So, at the beginning, you kind of have to trust yourself that, okay, this concerto seems impossible. I told all my friends that it was impossible. I was convinced it was impossible. But, you kind of have to realize that with each day, you make a little bit of progress. And, now I'm convinced that it is possible. It's really hard, but I no longer think it's impossible because, a week of tweaking my setup and, just getting to know the piece better. So I think it's a matter for me of just trusting myself. And when it comes to, closer to a performance, it's also a matter of trusting yourself. So even if you have a bad performance, maybe it was just because you were really stressed out. Maybe it's because, you were setting up right before you played, or maybe it was just too much for one day, maybe even pressing too hard. So, I think obviously taking breaks is important, and just not going too hard on yourself, I think, has been my solution.
Yeah. Wait, go ahead.
Did you actually eventually like the piece? I'm talking about specific the commission, the new piece.
The concerto I just talked about, the one that I just got a week ago. It's growing on me. It's hard when you first start learning a piece to form an opinion, because sometimes you're just so mad about how hard it is that you're like, okay, I hate this piece. I never want to play it again.
And it's not by choice too, right?
Right.
Yeah.
You have to play it. And I remember at Geneva, there was a commissioned marimba solo for the second round that was really hard, actually. And I remember lots of people said that they didn't want to play it just because it was too hard to be an enjoyable experience, whether preparing or performing it. And I understand that. But I think, for me, always, I just need to give myself the chance to get to know the piece. And usually I do end up liking it. With this concerto, it's hard because I don't know what it sounds like with ensemble. But, I think the composer, Judd Greenstein, he's written percussion music before. He has a beautiful solo. So I'm confident that it's going to work out well. And I think I'll probably like it after I learn it.
All right, good luck with that.
Thank you.
My question was kind of in the same line as that is so whenever you're learning a piece that was just newly made, no one has ever played this thing ever before. What would be your thought process? Are you trying to learn and play this piece for the composer, or and try to think about, okay, so this composer, I'm trying to see what kind of musical phrases this composer is trying to input into his or her music. Should I try to put my own musical flair and style into it, or is that too much of a risk to do for a piece that has never been played before by anyone else?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think my answer has changed over the past few years. If you had asked me when we were freshmen, first years in college, I would have said that the most important thing is just to play the notes on the page as accurately as you can. But over the years, as I studied with Michael Burritt at Eastman, and really became more confident in myself as a musician, I guess now I would say that it is really important, as the person or one of the people who are premiering this piece, you do want to put your own spin on it, because no one has done it before. You are free to make the choices, regarding, anything about the piece, not the notes, you can't change the notes, but when it comes to musical decisions, you are free. There is no tradition or, there is no precedence that you have to follow or consider when you're learning a piece. If you're learning a piece Safa or Con variations, there are millions, maybe not millions, but, hundreds of recordings out there of people who have played it before. And if you do something totally different, people are going to question it. They're going to be like, do you know how this piece goes? Whether or not you're allowed to do something totally different is a different discussion. But when it comes to a new piece, you really are free to do whatever you want. And, in the competition, you'll see lots of people playing it totally differently. And that's one of the great things about commissioning pieces for competitions is you allow the participants to really showcase who they are through the performance of these pieces. But yeah, I think that's my answer. I'm trying to remember your question, but.
Well, while we're on that topic, what about pieces that everybody knows, the one you talk about, Con variations or Merlin? For a competition, how do you balance between, this is my interpretation, this is who I am as a musician, versus this also you have to think about what the judges want to hear from conversations on Merlin. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, for sure. And actually, I just remembered I wanted to say with the last question that David asked, I do believe it is important that in a competition, you do want to present the composer's writing as accurately as you can. So yes, make your own musical decisions, but I think for first performance, especially if it's going to be recorded, like, you want to do your best. I think I got this from Mike Truesdell. Maybe he said that it is really important that you do your best to convey what the composer wrote. That way, for someone who's listening to it and deciding whether or not they want to play this piece, they get an accurate picture of what the composer wrote, if that makes sense. But to answer your actual question, for a piece like Conversations, like, if I remember correctly, you were asking, like, is it important in a competition to, like, put your own spin on it, right? Yeah. Yeah, I think totally. Especially, a lot of the times the jury, the judges who are listening to you, they're going to know these pieces really well, either having performed it or taught it, like, hundreds of times, They're going to know, like, the back of their hand. And, it can go two different ways. Sometimes with Bach, I've been warned that playing the chaconne, every person on the jury is going to have a different opinion about how it goes. So, if you, go too far off the road with the piece, like, that could be really dangerous. But I just think in general, you should be totally honest. I don't think you should try to ever appease a particular judge or, group of people on the jury. You should just play it how you feel it should go. Yeah, especially if it's a piece that everyone has played. I think it's really important to make your own musical decisions. So, we have a really good resource with YouTube with all these recordings of people playing these pieces. But I think it's important that you make your own choices. And, I've definitely watched other people's videos while learning a piece. But in general, I think you should try to maybe make your own decisions while you're learning and making those early decisions. I also think that there are some pieces where performance practice is important. If you're playing Conversations and it's a groovy piece, right? It's very rhythmic, and there are performers who take a totally different approach. But I think as a percussionist, you should know that maybe this is how the jury is used to hearing it, and if you take it in a completely different direction, that could be risky. Sometimes it's worth the risk, but other times you have to think about, how do I respect how do I show that I know how this piece has been played for the last 20, 30 years while still showing myself and who I am as a musician.
Makes sense.
I hope I'm sounding smart.
You're doing great. Where are we here? Okay.
We have a question about repertoire.
Do we? Do I? Do you? Who does?
Oh, the first one.
The first one?
For under competition.
Oh. So in terms of repertoire for competitions, what type of repertoire do you look at when entering one?
Oh, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's a question that depends on the competition. My answer would depend on the competition, right?
I actually had that written down too. Does it depend on the competition itself?
Yes, it
See,
does.
you are
Yeah.
smart.
Yeah.
You do sound smart.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't really know what I'm talking about, but I'm just speaking from my own experience. So, for example, I guess in the most recent past, I did a Murmur competition in Taipei. I did TROMP, which is a solo percussion competition in the Netherlands, and then I did the Geneva percussion competition. So they were all wildly different, and my rep was, kind of totally different. There was overlap, of course, because I'm not trying to learn new pieces for every competition. All new pieces, that is. But as an example, TROMP is the kind of competition where the jury that they pick is like, as an example, if you just look at the jury panel for 2 years ago, there were people like Michael Burritt, Emmanuel Sejourné, Momoka Kamiya, I think Martin Grubinger was on it, and a few others. And if you just look at the style of these artists and the rep that they play, you can kind of see maybe like what they're looking for. So in that case, I guess I would say that the programming for that competition, what I should have done is different than what I actually did. So, what I programmed was kind of what I knew at the time. So for my semifinal round, I played the chaconne, I played the Rogue Ashanti, I played Con Variations, and then, as David knows, there was a piece for bright red high heels called Cinderella that was commissioned. And yeah, so I guess talking with my teacher after the competition, I realized that maybe that wasn't the best programming choice for that competition. Maybe I shouldn't have picked Rogue Ashanti and Con Variations, two pieces that I would say are, I don't know what's the right word here, but they're more, they're harder to listen to, maybe. You have to really work hard maybe to follow what's going on. Not saying that that's a bad thing, but compared to a piece by Sejourné or Michael Burritt or Keiko Abe, we have a spectrum, which is good, of repertoire, types of repertoire. But when it comes to a competition like Geneva, if you look at the jury, these are artists that really focus on contemporary music. And, all of our music is contemporary, right? But I mean like European, like avant-garde contemporary music. So pieces like Omar or Loops 2, or for example, like the piece by the Swiss composer Michael Burritt that was commissioned for the second round. So there's a funny story about my host's mother, the lady who I was staying with during the competition. She came to watch me play in the second round, which was the vibraphone solo by Philippe Manoury, Rogue Ashanti by James Wood, and this new piece by Michael Burritt. And I came home and she's like, "Who listens to this?" And I'm like, "Wow, okay, so thanks for coming, and I'm glad that you liked it, I guess." I mean, but I don't blame her. I mean, that stuff is hard for, anyone who's not a percussionist to listen to, and sometimes even percussionists. I don't always want to listen to that in one sitting, right? If you're someone who listens to Mozart and Bach and Beethoven on a regular basis, or if you just listen to pop music on the radio, like, that's going to be hard to listen to 30 or 40 minutes of atonal, avant-garde contemporary percussion music. But, I programmed to that competition and to the jury, and I knew that I wanted to showcase what I could do with this kind of music. But then when it came to the third round, the semifinal round, I was actually able to change things up a little bit. And, I played this transcription of the last part of the Cone concert, which is a beautiful work for, I guess, piano. It was improvised by Keith Jarrett on a concert and then recorded and transcribed for guitar. And then I played it on marimba, as, other percussionists have. But that piece is the total opposite of anything I did on my second round. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, yeah, it depends on the competition, depends on who's on the jury, and then it depends on yourself. Some people will play a lot of Bach. Some people will, play a lot of really hardcore, intense, drummy pieces. It just depends on what you want to show. I chose to do the third movement of I Ching. It's the one with the kalimba and timpani, which is really pretty, really meditative. Whereas a lot of people for that round, they had a super drummy multi-piece. And, the jury, the audience, everyone has different opinion of your programming. But I think it's very personal. Yeah, so that's a very vague answer. I hope that helps a little bit.
So just to give some like insight on, at least into my head, what happened 2 years ago.
Uh-huh.
So when Oliver was playing his semifinals round at TROMP, I distinctly remember because I don't think Oliver ever told me, at least, like what exactly his program order was gonna be. Some of it was like already dictated for us. So like for the first round is like our required like marimba or vibraphone like Dutch piece, just for example, and then like a marimba or vibe piece that you could play as well. And then I had no idea like what was gonna be on Oliver's like semifinals. And then when I saw it, I was like, holy crap, this is freaking stacked. Like all of the pieces, like easily the easiest piece, and Cinderella was not like an easy piece because like it was a lot of like choreography and stuff they had to do with your hands. But that was easily the most chill part of Oliver's entire semifinals program. And I just remember like looking at the paper and I was like, oh my God, Oliver, what have you done to yourself? Because
yeah, I mean, that's a good point, David, actually. And I wanted to actually talk about that a little bit because, in the moment when I programmed that, I was like, okay, this is great. This is all like, it's going to be really impressive when they see me play all this, really hard stuff. But, in hindsight, reflecting back on that experience, it was not the best choice to, play these pieces. I mean, the chaconne, too, in addition to Raga Shanti and combinations, can be hard listening. It's 15 minutes of Bach, which, it requires you to pay attention. So, for anyone in the audience, even the jury, like they may not have appreciated me putting these 3 out of these 4 pieces on the program. So maybe in hindsight, I should have diversified. Maybe I should have put on a theatrical piece, something that was maybe even funny, or just something that was, gives the audience like a palate cleanser. So yeah, there are many aspects of programming that maybe you don't think about as a student. So yeah, good point, David.
So you're saying now you think more about the audience instead of winning the competition? Is that kind of what you're trying to say?
Ooh, okay, you really got me there. Okay, so I don't think you should program towards the audience and the jury exclusively. So, last year, or I guess this past semester, before COVID hit, I was programming for a few different recitals, and they had different audiences. One was for, it was at my old high school, and the audience would have been mostly band students, their parents, and high school teachers, mostly non-percussionists. And my programming for that was totally different from a recital I was going to put on at, a university. And, at the university, I would be playing for a percussion studio and a bunch of musicians. And, I would be comfortable playing all this atonal, avant-garde, contemporary rep. So I think it's important to know your audience, know who's listening. But I still think it's most important to, program the music that you want to play, because I think the audience is going to pick up on that. Some people told me after my semifinal round that they appreciated how personal my program seemed. So I know that's really vague and it's hard to figure out, how a program can be personal if you're an audience, but somehow, the way I played some of the pieces of my program, the audience was able to pick up that I actually really believed in these pieces and enjoyed, had a good time playing them. So I think that comes through for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, recital rap and competition rap are so different too, right? I mean, because recital rap, you want to showcase who you are as a musician, but competition rap is like, oh, there is like a guideline. You do have to play vibraphone solo, snare drum solo, so it's harder to make it personal. But
yeah, that's a great point, David. I don't know if you remember my senior recital. Also, for anyone listening, in case it's not clear, David and I were in the same class at Eastman. We spent 4 years together.
Wow, Eastman School of Music. Did you study with Michael?
And then David left me in Rochester. He went to Boston and left me alone for an entire year. It's tragic, but I guess he had fun and made more friends, which is fine, I guess. But what I was saying is, on my senior recital, the rep that I programmed, it was totally different from any of the competitions that I've done since then or before that. I played White Pines by Michael Burritt. That I mean, you wouldn't really be able to program it on a competition, but just the kind of music it is. Or for example, I did this piece by Chris Cerrone called Double Happiness. It was just a lot of pieces that I just really enjoyed and that I really felt comfortable playing and connected to. And that's not always the case with every piece I put on a program for a competition. Like, for example, well, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but my point is, like, sometimes for a competition, you're right. You had to program a piece because you need to show some side of your personality you're playing, or because you just have to pick a piece from a list, and that's the piece you go with.
Yeah.
No, you had something, Michael?
Yeah. Now I kind of think about it. I was like, I would feel bad if like someone had to prepare a recital that just completely showcase what they learned. Like, I don't know, because I feel like smaller school, they might just be like, oh, you have to do a marimba solo, oh, you have to do Sergium solo, you have to do timpani solo. And I think, I don't know, in a way I feel kind of sad because you're kind of doing it for like an exam, like you're not. But I guess it is what it is. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know why it's this thing of that. But
I mean,
anyway.
venting. Are you venting?
Yeah, venting a little bit. I don't know.
I get it.
Because I'm pretty heavy on as a marimba. Well, now I'm a marimba major, so I have to do marimba. But as an undergrad, I always, I feel a little stressed about doing other stuff other than marimba. But I know it's for the better. But at the same time, it's like, that's not who I really am as a musician. But I don't know.
I think a lot of the times, like, a teacher does have to, kind of take a student out of their comfort zone. I mean, I distinctly remember Michael Burritt doing that with me. He really tried to push me. I came in to Eastman. I was playing Hop 2 by Paul Lansky for my audition. I did Dream of the Cherry Blossom by Keiko Abe, and then, he had me do Time for Marimba, which is totally different from any of those pieces I had previously done. And then, the next year I did Mirage by Yasuo Tsuyoshi. And, he picked those pieces for a reason. He wanted to push my expression to a new level, to get me out of my box, and not just thinking about the notes, but think about how can you, bring drama to performance? How can you convey what the composer is writing? And yeah, I mean, I definitely didn't, like, those weren't pieces that I would have willingly chosen to play or learn if my teacher hadn't told me to. So yeah, it's tough as a student and as a teacher. You have to kind of find a balance between what you want to do and what you need to do to learn or to grow, I guess.
Yeah. All right. I guess to a more, like a typical question. Like, I feel like I talked to this topic with a lot of people, but like, what's your feeling with summer festival and competition? Like, what would you choose to do during a summer?
Ooh, that's a good question. Yeah, because for the past 3 summers, not this past summer, but the 3 summers before that, I did internships at tech companies, as I mentioned. So for 10 or 12 weeks, I was coding 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, and, not practicing really. I decided to do that, one, because, by working during the summer, that's a good way to, save up some money and pay for some of these competitions. For example, my sophomore year, by working that summer, I was able to afford, a plane ticket and, hotel fees for this competition in Taipei. And I wouldn't have been able to do that otherwise. So, that's a practical aspect, but also, as I said before, taking time away from music. That has nothing to do with your question. Your question was about competitions versus festivals, right? Yeah, but I'm just saying that for me, I chose to not do festivals. I did Chosen Vale and then the Lee Stevens Murma seminar my freshman year, and that was valuable. I got to meet a lot of people, which I think is the most important part of both festivals and competitions, is meeting people. You know, you're going to learn a lot. You're going to be playing music. It's going to be a high pressure situation. It's going to be intense, perhaps more intense than school is year in a year. But I think the most important thing is making connections, you know, getting to know people when you're not just practicing. And yeah, you can get that with both competitions and festivals. So yeah, I would say that I ended up choosing to, you know, do these internships. And that gave me the opportunity to also practice. So, you know, I kind of lied when I said that, you know, for 12 weeks I didn't practice at all. That's not really true. You know, for the past summer of 2018, summer of 2019, I did practice. In July, basically halfway through the summer, I would start practicing to get ready for these competitions. And if I was at a festival, you know, maybe I wouldn't have had as much time to practice. Because like when you're working a 40-hour job, like a full-time job, you know, you have the weekends to practice, which is what I kind of did. So yeah, I would say it depends on your goals. I mean, obviously, if you're trying to get into an orchestra, like, you know, doing Aspen or Round Top or any of these festivals is more important than trying to do Tromp. But yeah, I mean, I think whatever you think is best for you at the time. I would say when you're younger, it's more important to do festivals because you really want to meet people and get exposed to different teachers, different ways of playing than what you're doing at school during a year. And as you get older, then it's, you know, good to do competitions because then you really gain maturity as a performer and there's a lot of pressure on you and you grow a lot.
Yeah, I completely agree with the connection part because that was the reason I come to Boco, is because I met someone that graduated from Boco and I was like, oh,
Right.
marimba major, cool, tell me more. So
Yeah.
it's so cool to listen to people that are like from a different school, that are like completely different aspect than you, like
Yeah.
people from Northwestern. Like it's just really cool to hear different side of things. And yeah, and
Absolutely.
you know, Shane did a million years of drum corps, and you know, he get to meet a million people. You know.
Look, man, I'm trying to transition, bro. I'm getting better at the other side now.
No, I get it. My roommate, I was telling him about this, and I brought you up, Shane, because he marched SCV, and I was like, oh yeah, you might know Shane. He did marching stuff. And he was like, yeah, just show me his cover photo. I'll figure out who he, like, what group he was in. I mean, everyone knows everyone, so.
Wait, who's your roommate? If you don't mind me asking.
His name is Matthew West. He marched quad, so SDV.
No, I don't
maybe
know.
a few years ago. That's okay. I won't tell him unless he listens to the podcast. He won't be offended. He didn't know who you were either, so it's okay.
Right, we're all good then.
It probably would have been fine if like the season actually happened, but
yeah.
considering
Well,
it basically imploded on itself this year. Cool. So I think one last thing.
Wait, are you about to ask yours?
Oh yeah.
Very last thing.
Oh yeah.
Wait, hold on. I'm gonna ask Hope's question before we do that.
Oh, okay.
The one right above Michael's. How has the pandemic affected your transition into grad school, especially since you're preparing for Tromp as well?
Wow, that is a very. I keep saying it's a good question. You guys have really good questions. Yeah, because that's something. I just say that because I've been thinking about these things a lot, and it absolutely has affected my transition. You know, when you're going to a new school, you want to get to know people. You want to, you know, make friends and, you know, be able to have a life outside of practicing. And that's hard to do in a pandemic, you know? So as a grad student, when you're at school, you can't just walk into someone else's practice room and just listen to what they're doing or talk about what they're doing or just, you know, randomly, distract someone for like half an hour. So yeah, I would say it's tough.
Recalls a memory.
Yeah.
He's recalling memories. getting
Yeah.
distracted.
Yeah, I'm just talking about David. Like, you know, I
David.
was in the building.
David smiled as soon as you said that too. It was funny. I got to watch it all unfold right here.
No, I'm kidding. But yeah, and then when it comes to the competition, you know, obviously you have to practice a lot, so that's even less time you have to spend with getting to know your peers. So yeah, it's tough for sure. I'm lucky that I knew some people at Juilliard and in the city before I moved here, so it's not like I'm totally by myself in a big city. You know, I am able to go out and, you know, do things and hang out with people. But yeah, it is hard. And for anyone else who's in a similar situation, whether, you know, undergrad or grad, it's tough. But you just have to do your best and, you know, trust that hopefully by the spring, you know, things will be a little better and we'll be able to get to play with each other and, you know, by that process, get to know each other.
Oh, so is the building not open, like the practice building? Or
The building is open. It's right now it's accessible for like percussionists, pianists, people who need the practice in the building. There aren't any orchestra rehearsals or, you know, classes going on in the building, but it's available as a resource for practicing. I'm just saying that there are restrictions, like, you know, you can't just walk into someone else's room. It's one person in the room at a time. You leave an hour between, you know, practice sessions, and, you know, socializing is frowned upon. So, you know, the things that would normally happen at a music school don't. So that's a shame.
it is what it is. All right,
David.
David. One last thing.
Oh boy.
So yeah,
I'm terrified.
oh man, I'm about to hit you with another hard-hitting question.
This one's deep. I'm
Um,
looking at it right now.
so since you're pursuing your master's at Juilliard, kind of how has your experience been there? I know with the pandemic going on, you've kind of gotten like a bit of a stunted like experience at Juilliard so far. But how has your experience been there, especially with working with Druckman? And then what are your like plans, or what are you hoping to like accomplish once you graduate, like post-graduation?
Cool. So we have another hour, right, to talk about this? Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. So, yeah, I mean, you mentioned the word stunted. And yeah, I mean, there are things that, you know, we are missing out on. We're not able to do orchestra rehearsals or percussion ensemble rehearsals yet. Those will start hopefully in November. So, you know, I've been practicing a lot. Half of my lessons have been online, which is less than ideal. And, you know, all my music theory or academic classes are online. So, you know, there are things that, you know, you lose out on, but, sorry, I totally blanked on your question. You're asking me how was my experience at Juilliard, right, so far? Yeah, I would say despite the setbacks, you know, it's still been an amazing experience. And I think for anyone going to grad school, you know, I'm sure you would agree that like it's really nice and it's good to go somewhere different than where you've been spending the last 4, or in my case, 5 years at. So, you know, Juilliard is different from Eastman. There's a different vibe. The teachers are different. The studio is different. And you're in a different place. And I think that's really healthy. So for me, it definitely was, I guess, invigorating to, you know, be in this new environment. And, you know, you have similar goals, but it's just everything feels a little different. So that's nice. And then having a teacher, you know, Dan Druckman, I'm so fortunate to study with him. He's an amazing listener. You know, he's the son of a composer, Jacob Druckman. And, you know, with any piece, even pieces that he hasn't heard before, he can just pick out the smallest details, or like, you know, bigger issues in your playing that, you know, you can discuss and are really meaningful. So, you know, that's been a really positive experience. Like, Steve, what else did you ask me? I remember there was a lot.
Hoping to accomplish post-graduation.
Oh boy. Okay. Yeah. That's a hard one. Please see my website. I don't know. No,
It'll
my
be
website
linked
is-
below.
Yeah. What I hope to accomplish post-graduation. So, when you go to grad school, you should hopefully, have some ideas about that. But also, I think the 2 years you spend doing a master's degree should help you figure that out. So for me, I kind of had this vague idea of what I want to do professionally. And it also depends a lot on what happens in the next 2 years, So coming in, I know that, what I tell people, what I put in writing when I need to write about it is, I want to be a soloist. So what does that mean? How do you be a percussion soloist in America? There are people doing it. And I think for me, it just comes down to playing the rep that I really enjoy, that I think a lot of people in America just don't get a chance to hear, right? We're lucky that we have a lot of percussion groups, so Percussion Third Coast, Sandbox, traveling around and, they're exposing audiences to percussion music, but there's not a lot of solo, percussionists. It's just, not as common as a solo violinist or pianist. So I think there's a lot of repertoire that I think, a lot of people can connect with, even if it is contemporary avant-garde music, that it could be, hard to listen to. I think a lot of people can find ways to connect with it, especially if the performer, does a really good job, conveying what the music is all about. So, that's my primary goal, is to be able to, travel around, share my music with audiences. But, I'm realistic. I understand that, that's hard to do coming out of school. If, no one knows who you are, it's going to be hard to book concerts. So, I hope to be doing other projects. I want to collaborate with people, a lot of chamber music, and I want to do some teaching. So, right now I'm a teaching fellow for the MAP program at Juilliard, which is for kids, I think, age 8 through 18 in New York City. And normally they would come to Juilliard and play an orchestra, take lessons. But I've been teaching online classes for them right now. And, it's really nice. I did some private teaching this summer, and I think it's really important. Anyone who, is just a performer or who just wants to be a performer should probably also teach. I mean, I think it's just a really meaningful way to give back, with everything that I've experienced, all the teachers that I've had. I think it's important to, try to form a connection with your students, do master classes, clinics, whatever, just share the knowledge. So there's also, the technology aspect. I spent 5 years of my life doing computer science assignments and learning programming languages. I don't want to just, let that all go to waste. Not that it probably would go to waste even if I didn't do anything with it, but I do plan on, somehow integrating that into my career. So, I'm never going to be a full-time engineer, but, I'm taking technology classes right now, and I'm learning, how to use Logic, how to use Ableton Live, how to use Max MSP. And, I think there is a lot of opportunity, especially now and in the future, for, someone who can integrate technology into their performance and their career. So I definitely hope to do that. But that's a lot of vague stuff, but check back in 2 years and I'll give you a concrete answer.
Nice.
Jeez.
All right. Well, I think that's a wrap on this one.
Cool.
Right? Yeah, sweet. Thanks. Thank you for hopping on, Oliver.
Yeah, thank you guys for your great questions. It was really nice to talk to you. Thanks. It's great to meet you guys. I hope to meet you in person one day. Let me know if you're ever in New York City or.
Yeah, sure.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good luck at the rest of the semester for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
So.
To all of you for
Yes.
fighting this COVID.
No, just Oliver.
Just.
Not you, Shane. What the hell?
Oh yeah, dude.
All right, sweet.
All right.
That's a wrap.
Yeah.
All right. Bye, guys.